Yeah, okay, can I kick off?
Yeah, please do.
Why sanding sealer?
So sanding sealer plays an important part. It does a really important, it does several important jobs, in fact. First thing that it does is to seal the wood. Obviously, it's a sealer, as the name suggests. So what it does, it seals the open pores of the wood. So when you put the next coating on, you use less of it. Now, using less of it is a good thing, because the thinner the coat, basically the less finish you put on. It's great for your pocket, but it's also, the less you apply, the less prone it is to getting damaged. So that's a big, that's a big thing. Also, when you look at timber, it might, and you've sanded it down and it looks lovely and smooth, absolutely fine. You look at it under a microscope and you'd be very surprised at how pitted and horrible the surface is, and lots of loose friable material there. It's really not that smooth a surface. So the sanding sealer evens that out to a large extent as well, and it binds those loose fibers together to give you a much more solid coating, a much more solid foundation for the next coating you're going to put on. So it's doing lots of different jobs. Now, after you've put a sanding sealer on, if you run your hand across the top of the surface, it will feel very slightly rough to the touch. Now, people often think that it's raised the, that is getting really irritating, isn't it? I'm sorry about this. People often think that it's raised the grain, and that's not the case. What's actually happened is that there's a sanding agent within the sanding sealer that does several different jobs. One of the things it does is it helps to clog the open pores of the wood to give it that sealing process. But once the sanding sealer is dried, that sanding agent sits very slightly proud of the surface. So when you come to sand it back, that's what you're removing. You're not sanding through the sealer. People often think that you are, but you're not. All you're doing is removing that, the little bits of the sanding sealer that are sitting slightly proud of the surface. And that acts as a lubricant as well. The sanding agent acts as a lubricant to make the whole process easier. So that's why sanding sealer. It's not, to be frank, 100% essential, but it does do an important job. It will give you a better finish at the end of it, and it should make your life easier. So that's the whole thing about sanding sealers. We have got a YouTube video, which it's too long to play at the moment, but we've got a fairly comprehensive YouTube video on our channel about sanding sealers, and we've got the microscope pictures and all of that on there. So that's well worth a look if you've got a quarter of an hour to spare, and it's great for insomnia as well. So yeah, have a look at that, and that gives more information about the sanding sealers, why you use them, what they do. And the other important thing about sanding sealers, of course, is the compatibility. That's why there's so many of them, because they all work with different things. The cellulose sanding sealer is probably the most universal. That will work with most products over the top of it. But you've also got the acrylic sanding sealer and the shellac sanding sealer, and they work with less products. So they have different capabilities, different qualities, really. Quick plug for, on our website, I don't know if you've seen it or not, we have what we call the compatibility chart, and basically it tells you what you can use with what, which product goes with what, and it's a really good guide to have. You can download it for free. It's a PDF, it's an A4 PDF on the front page of our website, and if you haven't got a copy of it, really would recommend having one. It's really worth having in the workshop, just as a guide on what you've put on, what you can put on top of it.
Would you need the sanding sealer with mineral oil?
No, oils are about the only thing you don't use a sanding sealer with. With waxes, polishes, lacquers, everything else you'd use a sanding sealer, but oils want to penetrate into the wood. So as such, thank you for the link there. Because oils want to penetrate, you wouldn't use a sanding sealer with any of the oils. So that's, the finishing oil, Danish oil if you're using someone else's, lemon oil, hard wax oil, food safe finished mineral oil, anything like that you'd put onto the bare onto the unsealed wood. I always use the term bare wood for unsealed wood, but of course, if you stained it, that's perfectly okay. But yeah, that's where you that's what you need to do with that.
Sometimes when I'm turning a bowl, even though I think I managed to get rid of the cross grain effect, even though I think I've got rid of it, when I put on sanding sealer, it penetrates more there and I get a dark patch. Any ideas?
Do you thin the sanding sealer before you put it on?
No.
No, well, that's good. Okay, and which sanding sealer is it that you're using?
I can't remember.
Okay, is it the cellulose sanding sealer?
Cellulose, yep, that's the one.
Yep. Okay, all right. Just going to try something to see if I can stop this flickering. I've just had an idea. That makes a difference or not. Sorry, I've got the camera right in the way of my screen. So, basically what you're saying is that the sanding sealer is being absorbed more into certain areas than into others, and,
Yes.
and giving you a darker effect. Shouldn't really be happening. What grit are you sanding down to before you?
Probably about 400.
Okay.
Must try
Yeah.
harder.
Say again?
I must try harder, I suppose, is the answer.
Yeah, I wonder if perhaps you're putting slightly too much of it on, because it should be going on, it should be drying so quickly, really, that it doesn't have a chance to penetrate too far. So I'm at a bit of a loss to explain that one.
Sounds
So,
more like a porous area.
I do put it on quite thickly.
okay, you probably don't, you might be putting on too much of it.
Okay,
So yeah,
I'll try.
yeah. Again, with most finishing and using the sanding sealers isn't that much different. You really want to be applying fairly thin coats of it, so that's quite important. And with the sanding sealer, it should only be one coat anyway. But yeah, that might be worth trying.
Are there any precautions we need to take? Is it toxic, for instance?
So yeah, I mean, it is classed as a hazardous product, so you do need to be careful with it. Still talking about the cellulose one. If you're using the acrylic sanding sealer, that's pretty much, absolutely safe. There are no hazards with that whatsoever. The shellac sanding sealer and the cellulose sanding sealer are both highly flammable, so you obviously need to keep them away from naked flames and sources of heat, that sort of stuff, both with storage and in use. So if you are a smoker, you don't want to be when you're using them, and you want to use them, and pretty much any finish, quite honestly, in somewhere with a bit of ventilation. Now, with the amount that most hobby turners are going to be using the products, you're not going to come to any harm. You should be absolutely fine with it. If you're using it all day, every day at work, then you'd probably need some extraction and masks and the such like. But there's no harm in being careful and cautious with it. If you're using it a lot, make sure you've got an open window, make sure you've got a breeze coming through, some ventilation. If you are struggling with it, and some people are more susceptible to the fumes than others, then some sort of a proper mask, an air-fed mask, isn't a bad idea. But in the main, that shouldn't be necessary. So long as it's common sense, as long as you apply some common sense with it, then you should be absolutely fine. But
Okay.
If you do feel that it is getting a bit overpowering, then step into some fresh air, and very, very quickly it'll be absolutely fine from it.
Yeah, I was thinking of the French polishers at High Wycombe who got nose cancers.
Right. Okay.
I think they were using a shellac type thing. So.
Yeah. So I'm not quite sure. I'm going to guess from some time ago.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So the I don't know the history of that one, so I would
No,
need
no.
to look into that, of course. Of course, one of the differences would be that they would have been using the products pretty much all day, every day, and
Sure.
probably very little ventilation, because, again, depending on exactly when it was, although health and safety gets a bad reputation for interfering with too much, there was, and there is to a point, a place for it. And a lot of the practices that were carried on, and the cancers, the nose cancers and that, and I would suspect that part of the problem there would have been the type of solvent that was used in the French polish. Shellac itself is relatively inert as a sort of solid material, but it is dissolved into a usually a methylated spirit type product. Now, if the people using it, if it had been a particularly strong type of meths, that it does come in different grades, that could have had an effect on it. Some of the additives that might have been used in there, very often the cheaper solvents are used in some products, and they're the ones that are really harmful. So there's a lot of other factors that could have been going on there. I would have personally said that shellac, apart from the flammability, a relatively low risk product. So I can only assume there was something else being used.
Maybe, yeah, I'm sure you're right.
That was causing that. Interestingly enough, all of the sanding sealers in our range, as a dried film, they do conform with the EN 71 Part 3 regulations, which govern finishes for the use on toys and nursery furniture. So as a dried film, they're perfectly safe for toys. Don't get me started on food contact, but for toys, they'll be absolutely fine. So hopefully that says something about the products that are in there. It is really just the solvents that are the hazardous part that need to be treated with care. And interestingly enough, that's one of the reasons we don't put odorizers in any of our products. We don't make them smell nice, because I consider the sometimes unpleasant smell, sadly sometimes too pleasant, sometimes they are pleasant, but the unpleasant smell is almost like a warning to stop you from overdoing it with
Okay, thank you.
Is there any benefit or otherwise of diluting the sanding sealer?
No, none at all.
Okay.
You asked the question. No, it's a very common myth that the sanding sealer works better if you dilute it, and actually it works worse if you dilute it.
Okay.
You want the sanding, as we were saying earlier, the sanding sealer should sit on the surface of whatever you're working on. If you dilute it, it just soaks in and disappears, and it's effectively doing nothing. It's not sealing the wood. It might be binding some of it together under the surface, but it's not on the piece that you're working on. So it does defeat the object. There are a couple of occasions when you can, and it is beneficial to dilute it. The first one is if you're working on something that's a bit punky, a bit spalted, and you want to try and harden it up, then you can dilute it so that the sanding sealer soaks in further and hardens up the timber. But we're using it there as a wood hardener, not as a sanding sealer. Okay. So it is taking it into a different realm. And the other way of doing it is that very popular in the States is a product called a stain preconditioner, which evens out the porosity of a piece of timber. So if you're going to stain it afterwards, and pine is particularly a problem for this, you get different patches. It will go light and dark in certain areas. Now, if you use the diluted sanding sealer, that will even up the porosity on it and give you a better stained finish.
Okay, thanks.
Right.
Terry, what's the preferred method of application?
For a sanding sealer?
Yes.
The preferred method is whatever suits you best, quite honestly. Oh. There are lots of options on it. If I'm working on a small area, I'll use a cloth. I usually use a safety cloth that does the job really well. If I'm working on a larger area, I would probably use a brush, because you can load the brush with more liquid and apply it and cover a larger area. Remembering that it's quick drying, you need to move fairly quickly with it. So a brush will give you more flexibility, more time to work with it. And if you've got the facilities for it, you can spray it as well. And that's probably the best way of applying it. You get a nice even coating, a good coverage, and it will do the job really well. So that would be Yeah, that's probably about the best one. Anyone else?
In this very hot weather, my shed goes up to probably 35 degrees.
Yeah.
And I just have the sanding cedar and other finishes in bottles on the shelf. Is that dangerous, or do they degrade? Is there an optimum temperature?
It's not really dangerous. There is a spontaneous combustion limit for them, and I can't remember what it is, but we're unlikely to reach it, to be honest, so that shouldn't be a problem. And if, as long as they're in a sealed container, it's almost impossible for them to go up of their own accord. Yeah. Will it damage them? Again, sealed container, you're absolutely fine. What you will find, there are two things that you need to be aware of, is the waxes will melt. They will turn to liquid once you get above a certain temperature. It doesn't take that much. If that happens, and you need to be aware of it if you're going to open the can, because it will make a mess. But if it does melt, just leave it to dry out, put it somewhere cooler, and it will go back to its original consistency. It'll be perfectly okay to use. There'll be no problem with it. But the other thing to bear in mind when you're using using any of the finishes in hot weather, it will accelerate the drying time, and it can make getting a good finish very, very difficult. I did a demo many years ago, and I just didn't put two and two together. It's a very, very hot day. I couldn't work out why I wasn't getting a good finish on anything I was doing, and it was because it was so hot. And the second half of the demo, everything worked perfectly because the temperature dropped enough. So, yeah, if you are struggling with the finishing on a hot day, that's going to be the reason why. And that can also be a problem with the aerosols as well. If you're spraying and a little bit further away than would be ideal, perhaps, and if it's a very hot day, the lacquer or the sealer will dry in the air. It will dry before it hits the surface, and as such you end up almost pebble dashing the surface, so it doesn't have a chance to flow out, which it would do when it hits the timber. Normally the droplets would flow out and you get a nice smooth surface, but if it's dried before it gets there, then it obviously doesn't get an opportunity for that to happen. If I can just throw in another hot weather tip as well, sweaty hands, greasy hands are the absolute enemy of good finishing. So if you've got, if it is a very hot day, do try and do as much as you can to handle the timber as little as possible, and to make sure your hands are dry. What you'll find is that if you have had slightly sweaty, greasy fingers handling it, it will show up after you finish it like little fingerprints in the surface, little white fingerprints. So that's always a problem. If you think you have contaminated something before finishing it, once you've finished it, you've got no alternative but to take it all off, unfortunately. But if you think you might have contaminated it, surgical spirit is a great cleaner. It will take off pretty much everything that shouldn't be there, but evaporate away to leave no residue, so you can finish it as normal afterwards.
Terry,
yeah,
I'm going to mention something that you didn't want to talk about, and it's the food safety issue. I've got a particular project that I'm working on at the moment, where I'm having to make bowls and plates that are going to be used with hot food. Can Chestnut help?
Yeah, we can tell you not to do it. It's really difficult. So it's a long story. So we've got time. Yeah, we've got time. The real problem is that fundamentally, I mentioned earlier the EN71 Part 3 test, and that covers coatings for toys. So you know that if you're making nursery furniture, toys, whatever, children are going to eat it, lick it, suck it, whatever, then you know that they're not going to come to any harm. There's no equivalent test that's really covers everything that we need for woodworking. There's no test that we can use that we're 100% happy with. Now, people make claims for things to be food safe, and really the test that they're using isn't perfect for it. It doesn't really cover, it will cover things like inks and such like used on plastic packaging. I've seen people using stuff, using the test for sort of vinyl and nitrile gloves that people are using in hospital situations, or for food handling. And they're saying, well, it passes that test, it should be safe. It's not really the same thing, so you can't use the test for it. So the closest we're going to get to it is going to be the food safe finish, which is a natural mineral oil, and we have a certification for it that is safe for food contact. It's still a different test, but it's not as a coating, but it covers everything that we want it to do. And also the microcrystalline wax, we've had tested to the regulation that a lot of people use. And again, it's not ideal, but it's the only one that we can find that really gets anywhere close to what we want it to. So those two will give you, they will maintain the food safety of whatever you're putting it onto. If you are using a piece of yew, for example, or a spalted beech, because of the toxicity of what's in there already, the food safe or the microcrystalline are unlikely to upgrade it to make it safe. But if it's like an oak or something like that, that's fairly that's pretty safe to begin with, then it should maintain that. Now, what it's not going to do, though, is stand up to regular washing and lots of hot food. It's just not gonna. It's not really going to do that. The products are great. Things like salad bowls and fruit bowls, where it's going to come into contact with food, it will be fine for. But actual hot plated meals, it's a big ask of anything, quite honestly. So it will work, but it won't stay looking great for a very long time, for a long time. So it will require regular reapplication to keep it looking anywhere near halfway decent. And yeah, I'm not happy recommending it, because I know that it's not going to look good for long. So yeah, I think in a lot of ways, for something like that, your best bet is just to leave it plain. Is to not put anything on it at all.
Yeah, I've been finding that. I've been using mineral oil, and then I just flooded it to see where it was going to leak. I found a few leaks, managed to get them filled, but it did manage to raise the grain, which was a bonus because I could rub that down and reapplied it. And it was a case of I need to find how much I have to put on for it to stay usable.
Yeah.
It's very difficult depending on how much they're going to be using.
And what they're going to be using it with as well. I mean, if they're going to have like a hot plated meal and smother it in gravy, that's which is what I would do. It's going to very quickly damage that, and any cracks in there, it will leak. Basically, timber is often described as loads of straws stuck together, and that's what it is. And trying to make that waterproof is nigh on impossible. Anything that you put on there that still looks okay. I mean, you can use resins. Resins might be something to investigate. You can get food safe resins, I believe. That's about the only thing that's really going to do it. It's just then going to look like a lump of plastic, though. And then,
unfortunately,
yeah, it kind of defeats the object of making it out of timber in the first place.
Yeah,
so it's a very contentious point. I get very cross with some of the claims that I see where people claim, say that something is food safe, and it's really, I'm very dubious about it. That we won't make a claim that we can't back up with a certificate. We've just had all the toy safe products retested for food safety, for toy safety, get my words right. Quite an expensive exercise, but they changed the regulations recently, so we had to retest, and they've all passed, as we kind of knew they would, but we still had to do it. And if anyone wants it, we can supply that certificate. And I see other people make claims. I think, have you got the certificate for that? I don't think you have. So yeah, I won't make a claim that I can't back up.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, fine.
They've all gone to sleep.
Any other questions? Any other questions for Terry?
Yeah, there is one. I did actually watch, I think it was one of your videos concerning ebonizing lacquer and liming wax.
Yeah,
and I did have a go.
Green.
Well, I did have a go, but yeah, that's the thing. I did have a go, but I'm afraid they've gone back to the back of the cupboard, never to be used again. So obviously, and I thought my sanding was okay and my finish was okay, but obviously I was doing something wrong.
Okay, so talk me through the process that you used, if you can remember, and what happened at the end of it.
It was just, I think it was probably the finishing from the sanding that was the issue.
Right.
Because when I thought I was going to pick out certain parts of the grain, but in the end, the bits I wanted picked out didn't get picked out, and other bits did, and it was just a nightmare. So I just cut it all off and finished it with oil.
Okay, I'm just wondering if I can find that video. Hang on a sec. Thought I had all my videos handy, but I seem to have lost some of them. There we go.
There was a very handsome actor in it.
Yeah? Well, it wasn't me. Hang on, let's see if I can...
It was.
There we go. Is this the one? Let's get that playing. So, is it this video where we're... does that look familiar?
No, I thought it might have been a bigger piece than that.
All right. Well, this is a short
It was a vase, I believe. I remember it was a wire.
Okay. So, oh, wrong button. That's the one I wanted. I can't stop it. So, one of the most important things on this, obviously, we've got the vase. That's the end result. That's what we were aiming for. But one of the most important things is getting as smooth a surface as you can before you do very much with it. Now, what happens is that the process that we're going to put that I do on this is me doing this, is to put the ebonizing lacquer on and then the gilt cream, and the gilt cream sits in the open grain of the wood to give the decorative effect. Now the problem is that the gilt cream's not clever enough to know the difference between the grain and scratches in the wood that might have been left there from the sanding. So on this one I sanded it down to I sanded it smooth with the abrasive, then I went with the Nye-Web to make sure it was as smooth as possible. But it is a case of taking as much care as you can. I then attacked it, and it looks hideous, it looks horrific. I then attacked it with the liming brush. So that's, let's get that back where it was. So that's, it's a special wire brush that we have. There's a crimped metal on there. So I think it's phosphor bronze. It's crimped, so when you press it against the surface, it flicks out the soft open grain, but it doesn't really affect the flats, the hard closed areas. So you shouldn't get any scratches in there. Working with the grain there to open it up. This is very condensed video because we wanted to try and make it as short and watchable as possible before, and then put on the ebonizing lacquer. Now, one of the things, while I'm doing that, I'll carry on talking. One of the things that you can do, if you want to get a process like this, you want to make sure you haven't left any scratches behind, you can use something like a cellulose thinners rather, or spirit thinners, and wipe that over the surface. Because it's wet, it will show up any scratches that have been left behind. But because it dries very quickly, it won't raise the grain. So you haven't got to sand it back again afterwards, because obviously that would defeat the object. If you can see there's no scratches in it, but you have to sand it again because you've raised the grain. So I've coated it there with the ebonising lacquer, and I've left it 20 minutes to dry, and that's quite important because you want the ebonising lacquer to dry off. For fun, and this is an optional stage, I use the burnishing cream just to bring the ebonising lacquer up to a higher gloss. So there we go. Hopefully you can see that. The ebonising lacquer in its own is a fairly sort of satiny matte finish. The burnishing cream brings it up, and then the gilt cream. Sometimes the gilt cream will go a bit hard in the jar, so you might need to add some white spirit to it to bring it back to a softer consistency. But you should, then be able to wipe it on, kind of like this, and get a good finish from it. Now, hang on, let's take that back a second or two there. Come back. So as you can see, the gilt cream is all over the surface, and we've got, you know, it's not a very well defined pattern on there. So what we need to do next is remove the surplus gilt cream from there. Now, lots of different ways of doing this. I use the cut and polish next because it does give a nice final effect. But what you can do is just use something like even just the food safe finish, anything that will lubricate the surface, lubricate the gilt cream and bring it off, and that will make a good job of it. Now, if you're using something like the cut and polish, really important that you have left it 20 minutes to dry off before you do this stage. Use the safety cloth again, and then bring out. So you then get a more defined look there. You can definitely see, you know, the pattern of the grain. But so the gilt cream would have gone into any scratches that were there and marked it. Now on this, again, I've put a coat of WOODWAX 22 on there. That's optional. But if you want to give it a brighter finish and make it just that little bit more handleable, then this will do the job. Or you could even use the microcrystalline wax, and that's the end result. So it's a fairly good one. I'm happy with that. So yeah, you can. Yeah, it is doable, definitely. I'll stop sharing the screen. There we are. So it's definitely doable.
More practice then.
Yeah, I think so. Sorry, there's lots of strange noises going on there. So it is doable, but yeah, it is a bit of practice, really. But the preparation is something I always say. Preparation is one of the most important parts of your finishing. You know, you have to get that right, because if you don't, you know, you'll never get the perfect finish that you might be aiming for. Getting as smooth a surface as you can is one of the most important parts of finishing. So even before you pick hold of a bottle of polish, you need to make sure you've done the preparation, done the sanding, and got it as right as you can. Anyone else having, and remembering that most of you are muted at the moment, anyone else, anyone got a particular product they're struggling with, or that they haven't used and want to know a bit more about?
Terry, Danish oil.
Yeah, we don't do, obviously.
Oh.
We do finishing oil, so yeah.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I better shut up before I make a tough crap.
Similar product?
I'm not sure whose name is on the damn thing.
But if it says Danish oil, it's not ours.
Okay.
So Danish
Never
oil
mind.
originally was a Rustin's product, and when we started out, Ronnie Rustin, sadly no longer with us, but he's very good to us. He's very helpful and just generally supportive. And so, out of respect to him, when we launched our own oil finish, we called it finishing oil as opposed to Danish oil. By and large, pretty much the same product, same idea, but we just called it finishing oil because we thought that was the right thing to do at the time. So what did you want to know about it?
Well, okay, it's Hampshire Sheen, I beg your pardon. Sorry about that. Yeah, I finished a bowl with it and it smells, and it still smells. And it's probably 6 or 8 weeks now, and it still smells. But it's obviously not your product.
Yep, that's as much as I can say about it, really. Yep, that's what happens.
Oh, right. Oh,
So the oil finishes obviously are solvent based. They will have a smell to them, but you know, certainly all I can say is that with ours, the smell will hang around for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. But after 6 weeks, I would definitely have expected it to go away. What sort of smell are you talking of?
Yes. It's not a pleasant smell. It's
Are we talking like a white spirit solvent smell, or just a
possibly, yeah, possibly a solvent type of smell. I'm not terribly sure actually.
right?
Oh well, sorry about that.
Yeah, not one of ours. Sorry.
No. Blame Hampshire Sheen then.
I
It could
didn't say
actually
that.
be a combination of the wood and oil that you've used.
Yeah,
Yeah, it could be.
some woods are particularly, some of them are very unpleasant smelling. So it
Yeah.
could be something like
Okay.
that. It could be that the oil has brought something out that's in the wood. I don't know, but yeah, I can't say. I would have expected, had it been our product of that type, I would have expected the smell to dissipate after 2 to 3 weeks at the most.
Wash it off, Jim.
Say again?
Yeah,
Wash it off.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's on an oak bowl.
Is it stored out? Is the thing that you've made and coated? Is it stored outdoors or inside or?
It's indoors, yeah.
Yeah. If you can put it somewhere outdoors so it can ventilate better,
Oh,
it
that's
might
an idea. Yeah,
might do the
okay.
job. I would certainly try that before
Okay.
anything more drastic.
Magic, thank you.
That's right. How are we doing?
Any other questions?
Got lots of little videos I can show you. So anyone got?
I've got a question. Another question. Nothing to do with finishes.
Okay.
But how did you get into the business that you are now doing, and how did you get into such a niche market?
There's 2 parts to that. So I will tell you the honest. I'll give the honest answer. How I got into Chestnut products. So it goes back a long time now to when I was in my 20s, and a friend and I remember the evening quite well. I remember we were in a pub garden in Sevenoaks, and it's the area I used to live in, and we were bemoaning the fact that every weekend we spent most of the weekend working on our cars and trying to fix them and sorting stuff out. This is back in the days when you could actually take a car apart and put it back together again. And we both said, yeah, next job we get, we'll get a company car with it. That's, you know, don't care what job it is, as long as you've got a company car. And 6-7 months later on, the job that I had, the business got sold, and so I needed another job. So I was applying for jobs, and I had this in my mind. I wanted a job with a company car. And a local paint firm were advertising for trainee sales reps. So I went along and applied, got the job, and it was actually a really great start. So the company had this theory that they had about 10 reps covering most of the south of England, and they'd always have a trainee in readiness for when any one of the reps left for whatever reason. And they took me on, but they didn't have a spot for me to go to. And so I was training with them for probably about a year, to be honest, doing different things. And part of what they did, as well as being paint manufacturers, they made waxes and polishes and everything else. And so in that time, I did pretty much every job within the company. It was a big company. And I did pretty much everything as part of the training. And it was a fantastic grounding for what I went on to do later. Spent lots of time working in the lab, lots of time working on technical and everything else. And when I did finally go out on the road for them in a company car, then that stood me in good stead. I carried on doing that and still doing more of the training, working with the chemists and everyone else within the company. So it was excellent training. Anyway, I was there for about 7 or 8 years, and I didn't like they brought in a new managing director. In fact, they were on their second managing director by then, and I didn't like the way the company was going. And I thought, yeah, I could probably do something like this for myself. I was in a particular department in the company, and Chestnut Products was born, and that's nearly 30 years ago now, and been doing it ever since, really. So yeah, that's how I got to be where I am today.
Fair enough.
There we go.
Very entrepreneurial.
Yeah, it's a funny company, actually. It's no longer around, unfortunately, but a lot of the people that work there, it seemed to spark off this desire to go and work for yourself.
That's never good.
Say again?
That's never good.
Yeah, possibly not. I don't know. I mean,
not from their point of view.
Not from their point of view, certainly. I mean, I went on to be a customer of theirs. I sold some of their products at the time. So, yeah, it wasn't a bad move for them. And they, again, in the main, they were very supportive, which was great. But yeah, it was. I'm always grateful to them for the product knowledge and the training and everything else that I got with them. Which allows me to do pretty much what I do nowadays. So yeah.
And into the wood turning market?
Oh yeah, so that was almost, I knew there was a second part to the question. Thank you. If I'm honest, that was accidental. I had this idea for Chestnut Products and what I wanted to do, and per chance I got speaking to a wood turner. And he said, "Oh, you know, these products are really difficult to get a hold of. We can never find this, that, or the other." And I thought, well, I've got access to them. I can make those. I can have them made. Not going to be a problem whatsoever. So we started doing them, and wood turners latched onto the products very, very quickly. And so whilst we never wanted to be particularly niche, we wanted to be far more broad spectrum. We got very quickly allied to wood turners, and I'm not complaining about it, don't get me wrong, but yeah, that's how we ended up being mostly known for wood turning products, is because wood turners latched onto us. We didn't go out looking for wood turners particularly. Wood turners found us. Fantastic. I mean, we do deal with carvers and cabinet makers and lots of other wood related hobbies and businesses. But wood turning is the one that we're best known for, and that's a happy fluke, I guess, is the best way of describing it.
I think on that note, Terry, I know you've got to go. Thank you. It's been a fascinating question and answer. I don't know if anybody else has got any other questions that are brief, but...
We got time?
We got time?
I've got time for another couple. I've literally got to change my t-shirt and go.
Yeah, this is the good thing about Zoom. You can't see what you're wearing at the bottom end, but you can see the t-shirt at the top.
Yeah, I am fully dressed, but yeah. Actually, if there are no other questions, can I give a quick plug for our newsletter? I know that
please do
read it, but every week I send out an email newsletter. What happens is we get asked loads of questions every week about how to use our products. What's the best way of doing this, and how do I get around that? And so we take 3 questions every week, and we put them into our there we go, another link coming out. Someone's just too good out there, thank you. So we put 3 questions into the newsletter every week. We put the answers in as well, because it'd be mean otherwise, and just email it out. There's a little bit of an introduction and stuff like that, but it's not, you know, we try very hard not to make it salesy. It's not the idea. All we're trying to do is increase people's knowledge of how to get the best out of wood finishing products. So we send it out every Friday. If you want to sign up, just jump onto the website. The bottom of any page on the website is the form. All we need is your name and an email address. Fill that out, and we'll do the rest. And it'll turn up on Friday morning at 6 o'clock in your inbox. Simple as.
Which is a very good alarm to wake you up at that time.
All right for you. You're not there at 5:30 writing the thing. So.
Oh, you leave it that late, do you?
No, I really try not to. It's normally done and dust by Thursday evening and scheduled to go out at 6 o'clock.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah, but it's amazing when I get up in the morning, which isn't that much after that, I get a report of how many people have opened the newsletter, and there's by 7 o'clock there's quite a few people have already read it, and people say to me they look forward to it. It's their cup, they have it with their cup of tea on a Friday morning, and yeah, I'm surprised, pleasantly surprised, and ever so slightly worried actually how many people look forward to it. So yeah.
How many do you send out?
We're up to 1,200 a week now.
Wow,
that's pretty good.
Yeah, and we get again, so we get a report on how many have read. How many are opened anyway, and it's always around about 70% are actually opened. So I'm happy with that.
That's very high.
Yeah, I'm pleased with that, and I'm aware that as the numbers are still growing every week, and I'm aware that percentage is going to drop down, but it hasn't done as yet.
And as a regular reader, I can highly recommend it. It is fascinating.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Do my best.
Terry, have a good dinner.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be nice to go out for a meal with friends. And thank you for letting me come along. Thank you also for fitting in with my time schedule. I really appreciate that.
No, thank you for fitting in with ours. Much appreciated.
We got there. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much indeed. Don't forget the newsletter. Conker's live as well next week. We've got Chris Fisher, Blind Wood Turner. So it's free. So if you can come along, please do, and maybe see you online now.
Lovely.
All right. Thanks very much. I shall leave now. Thanks again. Cheers. Take care. Bye bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.